Hello everyone. In this video, we'll be looking at how to write documentation in Godot. Some people might say you don't need documentation and that the code should be written so well it doesn't need comments. Then you read that person's code and have no idea what the heck is going on. While it's true code should be written well enough to be self-documenting, you should include proper documentation as well. They go together. I also find forcing myself to write comments helps me understand my own code better. Godot has a great system where the code you document becomes included in the code reference, making the formatting clean and easy to read with very little effort. New with Godot 4.4, you're also able to hover over a property and a documentation tooltip will display. The starting project is in the description below in case you want to follow along, and I'll include the final result as well. Let's get started. Here I am in a test scene with a script that has some uncommented code. BuddyPal over here is going to help us write some documentation for it. Let's start by searching our script in the code reference. To search the code reference, make sure the script is open, then click on Search Help, and we'll see a huge list of everything in Godot. And if we search for our script documentation example, we'll see it show up. But documentationexample.gd is not a very good name, and it doesn't conform to the Godot guidelines. Let's give our class a better name. So we'll go back to the scripts, go to the top here, and we'll say class name, and I'll name it documentation example. Hit save, and as a side note, you'll need to hit save every time to see the changes we make in the script reflected in the documentation. Go back to search help, and we search for documentation example, and we see it show up under our new name. If we click on it, we'll see Godot has already generated a ton of information for us. All the public properties and methods are listed out. Notice how I said public. Private members are hidden by default. To mark something as private in GDScript, we make it start with an underscore. We have this function here, private function, and if we go into our script and we give it an underscore, we'll see in the documentation it no longer shows up. But we can still make it appear if we give it a description. To add a description, go to the line directly above our function, then type 2 hashtags. In GDScript, a single hashtag is for a basic comment and 2 hashtags is for a documentation comment. Then we can add our description. I'll say this is a private function, but since it has documentation, it will appear. And we can see our private function now show up in the documentation, and if we click on it, we can see the description that we gave it. Cool. Let's add a description for our class next. To add a class description, go to the next line under where we defined our class name and make it start with the 2 hashtags. Then we'll just say, this is my class description, and we can see it show up as our new class description. If you don't see it, make sure that there's a blank line between the description and the enum. Otherwise, it will apply to the enum. And class descriptions can actually be broken into 2 parts, a brief description and a detailed description. Right now, we only have a brief description. To add a detailed description, we'll need to add a new line with 2 hashtags and leave the rest blank. Then create another one where our detailed description will go. We'll say, this is my detailed description. Now, when we look at our doc, we'll see the brief description and the detailed description right below it. Cool. Sometimes descriptions can be a bit lengthy. They're not always just 4 or 5 words like we've had so far. If we're typing out a description and it starts to take up a lot of space, we can continue it on a new line, and in the documentation, it will stay on one continuous line. Let's say though we actually wanted this part of our description to be on a new line, we could do that too. The Godot docs uses something called BB code for formatting text, and we can use BB code to force a line break by going to where we want to start, using an open bracket, BR, and a close bracket, and then we can see that it forces a new line. Awesome. We can also add documentation comments in line, which is super useful for properties. For this variable, I'll say this is my variable, and in this enum, we can list out what each of these values are for. I'll say this is enum1, this is enum2, and so on. Then in the docs, we can see that it shows up for our enums and for our variable. Cool. Being able to write these doc strings in line can help save a lot of space for these smaller properties that don't have much of a description, giving us less lines in our files and making the code easier to read. And like I said with Godot 4.4, if you hover over any property that you wrote documentation for, you'll get a tooltip. One last thing I want to note with properties is adding a description to an exported variable will make it show up as a hint in the editor. For our exported variable, we'll say this is my exported variable. And yes, I know we've been very creative with all of our descriptions so far. Then if we select our node and go over and hover over the exported variable, we'll see a little tooltip displayed. Awesome. We can also add something called tags to our descriptions. We can give anything in our script the experimental or deprecated tags. An experimental tag basically tells people, hey, this is still a work in progress, so it may have some issues. We can mark our class as experimental by going into the description and giving it the @experimental tag. Then in the documentation, if we go up to the class description, we'll see that it has the experimental tag with a little warning message attached. The other tag I mentioned was the deprecated tag. When something gets deprecated, it is no longer supported by the developer, typically in favor of a newer and better version. Let's say I have this function here, and I deprecated it for this new version, the non-deprecated function. I can go give it a description. We'll say double hashtag @deprecated, and then do a colon, and we can give it a message saying, please use this other function instead. And we can link our other function with BB code. So use the open bracket and say method, then we'll put the method name, which is non-deprecated function. Then in the docs, we'll see that has now been tagged as deprecated. And if we go to the description, we'll see the link to the new function as well. Awesome. Class descriptions can also have another tag, the tutorial tag. The tutorial tag will generate a tutorial section in our documentation. To do this, go into the class description and give it @tutorial, then a parentheses, then we'll put the name of our tutorial. I'm just going to use part 1 of my Pawn series, which, by the way, if you haven't checked it out, you should. We'll say Pawn part 1, and then colon, and we'll link the video. Now in the docs, there's an online tutorial section, and if we click on it, we'll go to it.
Hello everyone, welcome.
Awesome. Now earlier I talked a little about using BB code to format text. We already saw how to force line breaks and links to other functions. You can also do things like linking properties, classes, signals, and a whole lot more. Basically, if you want to do something with your text, you can probably do it. There's way too many formatting options to cover in this video, so I'll leave a link to the BB code and class reference section of the Godot docs. One last thing I want to mention in this video is you can export your documentation to something like a web page. But that's a little complicated and beyond the scope of this video. You need to use the Godot command line to output your documentation to an XML file, then parse that XML file into the format you want. I'll consider covering that in a bonus video, but for now, I'll leave a link to the docs on the Godot command line tools if you want to read more about it. One more bonus tip is if you want to section blocks of your code for easier maintenance, you can highlight a code region, right-click, then hit Create Code Region, and you can give it whatever name you want. I'll just name this one Methods. Then you can expand and collapse the region easily. This is super useful for when you have a script that has thousands of lines of code and you don't want to scroll through all of it every time. Also too, I just think it makes the code look prettier. And that should do it for this video. I'll upload this final project to GitHub, and my Pawn project is fully documented, so you can also check that out for reference. The question for the day is, what is your pet peeve while developing? Mine is undocumented code. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.